to Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 13. And I'm going to read from verse 8 to 14 of chapter 13, and then read a few more verses in chapter 14. That is Saul, waited 7 days, the time appointed by Samuel, but Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattering from him. So Saul said, "Bring the burnt offering here to me and the peace offerings." And he offered the burnt offering. As soon as he had finished offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came, and Saul went out to meet him and greet him. Samuel said, "What have you done?" And Saul said, "When I saw that the people were scattering from me, and that you did not come within the days appointed, and that the Philistines had mustered at Michmash, I said, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the favor of the Lord. So I forced myself and offered the burnt offering." And Samuel said to Saul, "You have done foolishly. You have not kept the command of the Lord your God, with which he commanded you. For then the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commended him to be prince over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you." Chapter 14, verse 1. One day Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young man who carried his armor, "Come, let us go over to the Philistine garrison on the other side." But he did not tell his father. Saul was staying in the outskirts of Gibeah, in the pomegranate cave at Migron. The people who were with him were about 600 men, including Ahijah, the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, son of Phinehas, son of Eli, the priest of the Lord in Shiloh, wearing an ephod. And the people did not know that Jonathan had gone. Within the passes by which Jonathan sought to go over to the Philistine garrison, there was a rocky crag on the one side and rocky crag on the other side. The name of the one was Bozez, and the name of the other, Senaiah. And one crag rose on the north in front of Michmash, and the other on the south in front of Geba. Jonathan said to the young man who carried his armor, "Come, let us go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us, for nothing can hinder the Lord from saving by many or by few." And his armor bearer said to him, "Do all that is in your heart. Do as you wish. Behold, I am with you, heart and soul." Let's just read up to that point. Reading an Old Testament narrative is not easy for people who maybe, I hope all of you, are taking time to read and meditate on the passages that are assigned for each day, according to Daily Bible. And again, I really encourage you to do that, because it'll really help you to understand what's going on in the sermon. But anyway, reading a historical narrative is not easy, particularly if you are looking to find instant devotional points. So you want something very warm and very moving and inspiring. You just want something out of that story, especially for that day, usually a short selection. It's really not easy. And you may get lost in the fact that there are so many names of places that are mentioned. See, I struggled to read through those names too this morning. You could realize by reading that this is really not some kind of a hypothetical a historical document, but this is actually a document based on historical facts. There's definitely intention that goes into the narration part of the story, meaning that this is going to be written for us. It is written for us from the perspective of God, looking at how things had happened. But nevertheless, it is based on the factuality of the time. So when you read the names of these places that are completely unfamiliar to you, unless you have lived out there in Israel, maybe some of the names are retained today, maybe not. It's probably unfamiliar to you. Don't think that, wow, why do I have to read this? Think of yourself as a reader in the earlier time when you read such document, and that you would be able to plot, or you will be able to put the places on your map and able to understand what's going on. Imagine somebody writing about what we're doing here today. They would say something about West Marshall Street, they'll say something about Jeffersonville, they'll say something about West and East Norriton, and so on. And probably people hundreds of years after us would not understand what that really is, or do they really care. But what those names actually tell us is the fact that this is very much grounded in history. Not easy to get instant inspiration points from the historical narrative, but you sort of have to look at the big picture, and at the same time, listen to what God is saying about specific people and specific situations. Okay? So we're going to do that today. What is this story about? The story is about a war between Israel and Philistine. Who are the Philistines? Philistines, it's a reference to a particular group of people that were clustered around the Mediterranean shore. It's sort of the southern part of Palestine, but it's right there stuck by the water, by the ocean. They were constant thorn on the side for Israel. There's some speculation that Philistines were actually not originated from the ancient Near East, or what we might call the Middle East, but these people were migrants from Greece by the passageway of the water. I don't know whether that's true or not, but I've heard that as a possible explanation of why they were there. But the Philistines were very much present in the historical narratives of 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel, and so on. You remember that in the first story that we talked about the household of Eli, the two sons of Eli were wicked, and they were brought to face the judgment from God, and remember, they died in the war against the Philistines. And you also will see, not yet, but as you read on, that Saul, the King Saul, and his children, including Jonathan, whom it's very hard to hate Jonathan, he's actually a very likable man, but they all die. They all die in this, in a different war, but same people against the Philistine. Remember the story of David and Goliath? I mean, how can you not know? You heard it so many times, especially if you were raised in the church. Favorite story, right, for Sunday schools and so on, how David, this young man, was able to beat this huge giant Goliath. And you may remember that Goliath was actually a general for the Philistines. So Philistines were always present in this time period as the enemy of the people of Israel. Israel really didn't handle Philistines very well. One of the reasons why that was so is because Israelites did not know how to do metalwork. Now that sounds really funny, but I guess if you go back to that time, all these things can be plot into the sort of the civilization and how they were developed and so on. There was no metal worker in Israel. There's nobody who could hammer a metal into a sword that's strong enough to fight in a battle. There was nobody who was able to do that, to make a spear for war. And we are told in chapter 13, in the part that we did not read, that only in the Philistine, only in the region of the Philistine, would Israelites be able to buy metal instruments, even for their agricultural work, plows, and stuff like that. They had to go down to the Philistine area to get them, because the metal work was only done in their region. And Philistines made sure that Israelites did not learn how to do this work. You might think, isn't that simple enough? Isn't it hard? Is it really that hard to sneak somebody over? But technology is a very elusive thing. I mean, you might be able to imitate certain things, but to get to the level of the quality that might be needed, no. So imagine a war being fought between people that had metal weapons versus those who did not. Okay? We are told, and you hopefully have read some of it, that the persons who had sword or spear on the Israelite side were only two, King Saul and Jonathan, the son. So you wonder, what would others have carried in their hands? Maybe a staff, maybe some of their agricultural type of equipments. And none of them were up to par with the weapons of the Philistines. So this is a kind of war that wouldn't really work. But it's interesting that if you read chapter 13:3, it says, Jonathan defeated the garrison of the Philistine that was at Geba, and the Philistines heard of it. But there was a defensive line set up by the Philistine in an area called Geba, and it was actually Jonathan who initiated the regional fight. Jonathan had about 1,000 men under him, and at this time, Saul, the father, the king, had about 2,000 men under his leadership. So in this case, Jonathan actually made the initial attack, and as a result, Philistines were very much provoked by this, and they raised up a mighty army to fight against the entire people of Israel. They looked very impressive. 13:5, and the Philistines mustered to fight with Israel 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen and troops, like the sand on the seashore in multitude. Totally outnumbering Israelites, and completely different level of armor. These people are coming with chariots and horses, where Israelites, initially about 3,000 of them, you later realize there are only about 600 left because all the soldiers ran away. They were so afraid of what was to come. It was a very difficult situation. The people of Israel were deeply, deeply fearful of the consequence. So they start running away. They crossed Jordan River to the other side to escape from the war. And this is the reality of the time. Okay, what should Saul do? Saul is the king, newly established, and king is supposed to be the one that leads the people into battle and to protect the nation from being harmed by the invaders. So everyone was looking up to Saul to lead, but there's really not much to lead. The people were afraid, they were scattering, and this was a very, very tough situation. This is actually a good time, though, for us to look into the character of Saul. Because Saul was facing a very, very serious test. Isn't it true, brothers and sisters, that when you face difficult times in your life, that it tends to reveal what's really in your heart? I mean, you could say the other way too. I mean, when you become suddenly very wealthy, you strike a gold mine and you become very resourceful, at times that itself could become a big test for you. But typically, because we usually don't hit jackpot, we usually go through a lot of trials in life. It's when we have trials, it's when difficult things happen to our lives, when relationships break down, when our health goes down, when marriages suffer, when you have school problem, when you face financial problem in your life. When these things happen, your heart is revealed. God often brings tests to reveal what's in our heart. This was definitely a difficult time for Saul. It was a difficult time for Jonathan as well. But the harshness of the time, the difficulty of the time, provided an opportunity for almost like making a window to look into their heart. What's going on inside of their hearts? Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 2 describes why God let the Israelites wander in the desert for 40 years. From a pragmatic standpoint, it makes no sense. From Egypt to Palestine, the distance wasn't that far. You could have gone there in less than 2 months. But for 40 years, the people wandered in the desert. And when Moses, the leader, was finally summing up all their experiences together for those 40 years, Moses said, the reason why God made you wander around in the desert for 40 years is that God would humble you, that God would test you, to show what is really in your heart, whether you obey his commandments or not. God is not like man, right? God sees the heart anyways. We may try very hard to cover ourselves up, but God will penetrate into our hearts and see exactly what's in us. God sees my heart right now. You may be listening to my voice, you may be seeing my outward appearance, but God pierces into my heart and he sees. There's no mistake about that from God's side. So what does it mean that God reveals the hearts through trials? Does God have to see the hearts because they're invisible? No, they're visible to God. God knows the heart. But the revealing of the heart is not particularly for God, but it is for us and it is for others around us. When we face trials, when we have hardships come upon our lives, and when we respond to the hardship, it reveals the state of our heart to ourselves. What God sees becomes visible to us as well. I would say the key word or the main focus of this message is faith. Because when the heart is open for believers, the heart is open. When trial comes and our heart is open, then the heart condition can be described either as faithful on one hand or unfaithful. Faith or disbelief, unbelief. You will realize when you read the Gospels in the New Testament, Jesus is always showing people's hearts. Jesus sees the faith, and sometimes Jesus sees the unbelief. Jesus laments of people's unbelief. Jesus commends people of their faith. In the passage today, because of this hardship that Saul was facing, you see into his heart. Was there faith in Saul, or was there disbelief? Well, this is really the main point of the sermon today, so I want you to be able to get this. You know, I read through this passage more than what we read this morning. In fact, try to tie it all together, and I saw something that I didn't notice before. I knew something was not quite right in the way Saul responds to this situation, but I couldn't quite pinpoint what it was. But as I meditated, as I read through it, I came to a conclusion that the hardship displayed to us, the readers, the heart of Saul, that was really off. And in what sense was his heart off? In what sense his faith was misplaced? And this is my conclusion, that I think the kind of religion that Saul had when his heart was wide open, if you could look into what's going on in his heart, you will realize that his religion was full of magic, full of superstition. What's the other side then? What would be a true faith? What would true faith look like? And I would say the true faith, on the other hand, is relationship. It's relational. But in the case of Saul, you look into his heart and the way he conducts himself in the situation, you realize that his religion is full of magical superstition. Well, these are familiar things, aren't they? Burnt offerings. Israelites were very used to that. And you will see there's an incident with the Ark of the Covenant, or making an oath, and so on. But these things, which seem familiar in the lives of the Israelites, had to be placed in the right context, or else they turn into mere magical formulas. Well, let me show you what I mean by that. There are a couple of incidents that shows that Saul's faith was very much superstitious or magical in the way he understood it. And it happens, first of all, in chapter 13, where we read about this offering of burnt offering. Okay, it looks like Samuel was at fault, because Samuel said, I'll be in Gilgal to come to you in about a week time, 1 week time. He did not come after 1 week. And what was going on? Samuel didn't come. The Philistines were mustering their strength, and they're about to come and invade Gilgal area, where there were now just about 600 men were left on Saul's side. It seemed like this is a losing battle. There's no chance for them to survive this attack by the Philistine. And Samuel wasn't coming. And who was Samuel? Samuel was the last judge of Israel. And after the fall of the household of Eli, Samuel also took the responsibility of a priesthood, and he offered sacrifices to God. He did all the rituals of sacrifice. On the other hand, with the rise of a king, Saul was the first king, there was increasingly a division of labor. Okay, so king would not do any kind of religious kind of acts, such as priestly offering. But rather, the king would be king. He would be a military leader. He would be a political leader. But on the other hand, priest would be a religious or spiritual leader. And they're also prophet. It's very interesting when you read on this historical development, that by the time that more kings come about after that, you realize that 3 offices that are very common in the Old Testament Israel: the office of kingship, office of priesthood, the office of a prophethood. Those 3 things are very well distinguished between people. So you don't have one person doing all the work together, right? So king would be a king, priest would be a priest, and a prophet would be a prophet. And this is sort of the beginning point of that kind of division of labor. But when you look deeper into what's going on, it's really not about sort of a fuss that Samuel is raising because somehow Saul invaded into his own domain of work. You know, you shouldn't have done the sacrifice because I'm the one who's supposed to do it. It's much more than that. You look into it, right? When Saul didn't see Samuel coming, he was desperate. He really needed to do something, and at that point, what does he do? He sacrifices a burnt offering himself. Why did he do that? Chapter 13, verse 12. He said, "Now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the favor of the Lord. So I forced myself and offered the burnt offering." He's saying, I had to give burnt offering because that was the only way I could get the favor from God. You are not here. You're supposed to do that for me. You're supposed to pray for me. You're supposed to give an offering for me. And you are not here. You didn't do the job for me. So I had to do it myself because I cannot imagine going to this battle without first appeasing God with a burnt offering. Something very similar happens in chapter 15 when Saul was sent to fight a war against the Amalekites, and he comes back not obeying God's command. He comes back with good things that he captured from the Amalekites. And when Samuel confronted him, God said this is a war of judgment. Why did you make those things live? And Saul said, well, I did that because I want to bring these to be sacrifices before God. But this is what Samuel said, chapter 15, verse 22. Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, to listen than to the fat of rams. So what is Samuel saying? Samuel's saying, look, sacrifice may be a good thing, but do you think God delights in the sacrifice more than you listening to his voice? What have you done, Saul? You made a sacrifice to God thinking that there was something magical in the act of sacrifice, and in doing so, you were disobeying God. God said, don't do it, but you did it. And you said, I did it because doing this would please God or appease God. There was some kind of magical formula in the offering act itself. Certainly not the case. Saul's heart was hardened. His heart didn't quite address the issue of his relationship with God. A relationship of listening to the voice of God and obeying the voice of God and living in this vital relationship with God. No, instead it was all about doing things almost like a magical formula to earn God's favor. The second incident is when Philistines were being, they were being defeated by God. Really, it was power of God that did it. And Jonathan had something to do with it, but it was really God who made the army of the Philistine collapse. And this is in chapter 14, verse 16 and the 18. There you see Saul watching what's going on. And instead of jumping into the battle, what he does is that he calls Ahijah, who was a great-grandson of Prophet Eli, and he said, bring the Ark of the Covenant. Again, remember the war where two sons of Eli died? Same thing, right? The war was being lost, and people said, bring the Ark of God. And two sons of Eli carried the Ark of God into the battlefield, and guess what happened? They were all killed, and the Ark of God was captured by the Philistine. In this case, same thing. Somehow, they believed that there was a magical power in the Ark of God, and as long as we take the Ark of God, God may have favor upon us. What is this man relying on? What is this man Saul, the king, relying on? He's relying on this kind of magical symbols. Yes, used it in the right way. Ark of Covenant meant it represented the presence of God, but it's not the magic of it. It's the covenantal relationship between God and his people that is at the heart. It is not just that box. Somehow that box had a magical power that to call upon that power to act in your behalf is what this religion is all about. One other thing is when Saul actually put a curse on his people, or some kind of oath with curse. It's really strange what he did. It's in the midst of a war. In chapter 14, verse 24, the men of Israel had been hard-pressed that day, so Saul had laid an oath on the people, saying, "Cursed be the man who eats food until it is evening, and I am avenged on my enemies." It's hard to understand. The people were fighting a battle, and one thing that they need to have is food. They need to be sustained by food to fight the battle. But Saul puts an oath on people. Until the war is done, if anybody eats anything, there shall be a curse upon that man, and that person will be cut off from Israel, will be killed. This kind of work or this kind of action is completely out of natural logic, isn't it? But he did it. He proclaimed fasting to the people in the middle of a war. Why? Because through this dramatic act of commitment or act of sacrifice, that he thought somehow God's heart will be moved. Saul's faith or Saul's religion is not based on a personal, living, vital relationship with God and His Word. Saul's faith or religion is not based on a true understanding of what it is that God wants in His relationship with him and the people of Israel. It is superstitious. It is magical. And obviously, God would not honor that. I wonder how you and we think in this case. How do you feel about that? Why do you worship? Why are you here today? Are you here because you have a sense of obligation? That's good. Every Christian should be obligated to worship God, at least in a public worship on the Lord's Day. The fact that you are here, it's a good thing, that it's the right thing to do. But if your mind is all about a sense of obligation, a sense of this pressure, that if you didn't do this, somehow you're going to have some bad luck in the middle of the week. I need to go to church because I don't feel right when I don't do that. I need to go to church because it's what I do all the time and it keeps me in the right place. Why do you give offering? Praise God for your financial commitment to the ministry. And maybe for some people, it also has some kind of magical side to it. This is a funny story, but I actually heard one of the brothers say, I didn't give offering to the Lord that Sunday, and guess what happened that week? I had a speeding ticket, and my money was taken from me. Oh, God is God of justice. Why do you seek blessing from God? Worship, offering, prayer of intercession, asking pastor to pray for you. It's not about magic. It's not about doing things so that you will have a good luck. Or somehow you feel like I've done it. Oh, I went to church last Sunday. I'm fine. I gave offering last Sunday. I'm okay. My pastor prayed for me. I'm okay. No. It's not about that. It's about you having a vital relationship with a living God. You know why this is so glorious right